Welcome to the Magic Academy. Today I'll be sharing with you my experience at the domestic violence shelter. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I really appreciate you coming back and tuning in for this video. It's very important to have your support for this one. I really appreciate it. Please go ahead and subscribe if you're not already subscribed to this channel. And when that bell pops up, click that. You'll be notified when I upload videos. Also, give us a like and share on social media this video if you would. Facebook, Twitter, or wherever you like to share YouTube videos. It helps bring people back to watch and subscribe. That grows the channel and it helps me do more for you here on YouTube. Okay, you guys, so this video is a difficult one for me to do. I can't tell you how many times I've already started this video over. I've erased footage. It's confusing, it's emotional, it gets me tongue-tied. I lose my train of thought of where I'm going. But I'm going to try really hard here. Here's what I want to do in sharing this video. I want to give you some background in my experience with domestic violence and abuse, you know, in my adult life and maybe where it began as a child. Then I want to cover what relationships put me at the domestic violence shelter that last time that got me there. And then I want to explain some things that were unique to me at the domestic violence shelter and and unbelievable. And then I want to share some things that are kind of common ground for everybody, that as far as like what my experience was that anybody would have gone through. Okay, so that's the outline that I want to cover with you guys. So we'll start with some history. We'll go with adult history first, and then I'll backtrack a little and then we'll go forward again. Okay, so straight out of high school, right into college, the first boyfriend I had was abusive, and he wasn't the first one. I had abusive boyfriends in high school. So for whatever reason, I find a guy. Oh, this is a nice guy. We're going on a date. We talk. You know, we do everything that everybody does when they're dating. You get to know each other. You get cuddly. You know, it seems like it's got a good flow to it. And then all of a sudden, the relationship turns very constrictive, very possessive, and you know, he worries that you're cheating. He worries that you are spying on him, and I mean stuff out of nowhere where there's nothing to even back what they're where they're coming up with this insane accusations on you, and you're like, and it's a fight out of nothing. Nothing's happened. There's no proof of it. It's their imagination, and they're gonna fight, and they fight with you as if it's real, as if these experiences have happened. And it happened in every single relationship that I had after a couple of them in high school, but every single one after that. So the very first guy that I dated in college, I went to a Christian university. Okay, so you would think that there would be it would be easy to find some nice people at a university that was specialized, right, in a religion especially. So the first guy, I was like, oh, this guy's nice. We're going to go out. We started dating. My mom kicked me out while I was dating him. She didn't like me going on one date with him, and she kicked me out. So, you know, he had to cover with giving me a place to stay, trying to help me get back with my mom or find some place to stay or get into the dorms. You know, it was just unexpected, right? So yeah, the relationship started off, the friendship started off just me being kicked out of my mom's house for one date, our first date. And where do you go from there? There's nothing to build on. And come to find out, this guy likes to drink alcohol. He likes, he's been a partier his whole life, where he had told me he wasn't, and that he was just this innocent guy. I'm like, oh, I really didn't want somebody really this experienced. trying to get into the dorms. This was like from October to December. I got in the dorms in December. So for 3 months, I was staying with him, and it was chaotic. A few weeks of normalcy and getting to know each other, and then after that, he thought that I was spying on him and doing all the things I just said, and he got stifling. He wouldn't let me leave the door to go to classes. I couldn't leave the apartment to go to classes. It was nuts. Totally nuts. And because there was no excuse for it, none at all. And so, I mean, how do you check on your benefits in college if you can't leave the class? I mean, leave the apartment. So, you know, what do you do? So lo and behold, I get into the dorms. Just before I get into the dorms, we broke up, and I was homeless for a few weeks all by myself. And then I get in, you know, stayed with somebody else there, a girl, on campus, and finally got into the dorms. Yay! By this time, I was emotionally shot to try to keep up my classes. You know, I'll let you know, I flunked out of that whole second semester. But midway through, or like the first couple months into having a dorm, I'm totally broken up with this guy. We've not had any contact. I mean, he keeps calling and hanging up on me, and just being ridiculous, and standing outside my window and just looking at my dorm window, freaking out my roommate and the roommates around us. I mean, doing some weird things like that. And this guy was a little bit weird. On campus, you know, he'd been a hunter and he had guns, and, you know, he went ahead and skinned his deer right on his balcony on campus, and it freaked out a lot of people. So people were freaked out by him in the first place. And then he does freaky stuff like this. Nobody knows what to think. It freaks everybody out. And here I am, 18 years old. It's really freaking me out. Just his behavior. It's just not normal behavior to do any of that for no reasons. And so my friend's like, look, you got to go out with this guy that really likes you. Get off campus for a little bit. You'll feel good. So I went to dinner. This guy was really, you know, decent about taking me to dinner. We went and parked for a little while. It wasn't, I just didn't want to go back to the dorm right away. So something was just telling me, just, you know, stay out and enjoy the night air for a little while. So we did. And then it was time to go back home. And going back home to the dorm, he's driving me back to my dorm. He's like, I had a really nice night, and we're going over the speed bumps, and we noticed cop cars as we get close to my dorm. And there's like a lot of cop cars, okay, like 6 or 7 cop cars. And come to find out, the guy that I was dating had freaked out and decided that he wanted to kill me, I guess, was what the word was. He made it up to the second floor. He broke into the female dorms, the girls' dorms, with a Ruger, a .45 Ruger gun, pistol, and was going to kill me. That was the plan. Or kidnap me. He wasn't sure, from what I found out. But he knew the passcode to get in, you know, to the locked door, and came to our dorm room. Luckily, my roommate was on vacation to see her parents that weekend. She had taken off for the weekend to go visit home. So neither one of us were home in the dorm room. And he had lived in the guys' dorms at this point, and the male dorm, the guy that monitored the man's dorm, was a black belt in, you know, Taekwondo or something. And so he handled the situation and let the police get there. And the guy got arrested and then later joined the Navy. And the school put me on hush, just treated it like it was nothing, like nothing happened, and just was like, well, you know, we can't renew any of your loans or grants for next year. Hope you get another college. Goodbye. There was nothing. And if I had been a little bit smarter and hadn't been kicked out from my mom's house and everything else, maybe I could have gotten an attorney and said, look what's happened to me on this campus, you know, private Baptist college, and that's what happened to me. So there we go. There's my first year as an adult, a legitimate adult, and that's my first experience. So yeah, I should have went to the domestic violence shelter right then. I should have been like, okay, I'm worried, you know, I don't know what, because I needed to go in hiding then. Really freaked out by the guy. So of course, now I'm still homeless because the school doesn't want me. And I go to church, and the deacon of the church lets me live with them, him and his wife and family. And going to church, I meet my ex-husband. And I go to his house a lot for, you know, sodas and things and movies after services with groups. And we got close quickly, and we dated for a year and a half. I got pregnant. We got married after a year and a half of dating. And during this time, there was no abuse. There was nothing, you know. I mean, I knew he'd had lots of fights with his parents, but there was nothing between us. A year and a half where everything was solid, I thought, because there was no ups and downs. I mean, we'd broken up a couple times because people do that. You know, you don't know what to think as a young person about love and life. So, you know, but I did think I was in love with him, you know. The person that I thought I knew, I thought I was in love with him. And so I got pregnant, we got married, and oh my gosh, as soon as we got married, a couple months into the marriage, you know, the stifling happens, the control happens. You can't leave my house without telling my mother, and he has to go away for military stuff, and I've got to finish cosmetology school, and you know, there's just battles going on, and you know, we get our own apartment finally. I think it's just because we're living with his parents. We get our own apartment, and just it goes crazy. You know, the domestic violence is just crazy. And the night before my wedding was just horrible too. I'm not even going to share that right now. Maybe someday that'll be a special story, but it was a nightmare. His mother had to come pick me up and make me go to the chapel and marry him, and I was like, I don't want to. And she forced me to go. And I was like, I felt like I was like in such shock. I just did what the woman said, and it never should have happened. The marriage lasted 3.5 years, and during that time, I tried to get into the domestic violence shelter to leave multiple times. Could never get in. Never could get, I couldn't get hardly even them to answer the call, and when they did, they were like, we're full. Every single time that happened. And I just don't buy it. You know, I was always like thinking to myself, he's got connections or something. His mom's got connections because she's a school teacher. Sometimes school teachers have, you know, social connections like that with community stuff. So I kind of figured maybe that was, you know, something was like that going on. Anyway, finally, you know, that marriage was over, got away, and every relationship I had thereafter was the same thing. So the very next, so 3 relationships later, I get evicted, same old story, and I'm the guy that I was closest to at that point in time that I had seen a few times said, hey, you can come stay with me and my brother, and then we can go ask my foster mom if we can go live with her for a little bit until your job helps you get on your feet. You know, she's real nice, maybe she'll help you do that. I was like, maybe she's got resources, so I ended up staying with this woman for like 3 years, you guys, homeless and in domestic violence. And in front of his parents, there was no physical anything. He was a closet alcoholic to them, but severe. And, you know, he had told me that he'd been an ex-drug addict. I don't think it was ex-drug addict. I think it was just closet everything. But he did drink in front of me, and it was nightly, constantly. He always had to go out for a beer, and it was like closing down the place with pitchers of beer all the time. And, I mean, I didn't drink that much. I tried to stick to soda a lot of times, but, I mean, this guy just was an alcoholic all the time, and his parents, his foster parents, refused to see it. Now, I'll tell you, his foster parents, he was an adult too, but he had gone back home to them, okay? So it was just very bad situation. And I just couldn't get stable with this guy. It was never going to happen because he kept stealing my money. Anything that I had, he would sell, you know, I mean, it was just horrible. broke up with him, dated this other guy for 3 months, domestic violence, ran back to him. I'm like, can you at least just help me? Your mom still has all my stuff here. Can you guys at least help me find someplace to stay? So he got an apartment because he had gotten stable during the 3 months that I had left him. Ridiculous. Wouldn't keep a job during the time that we were dating. Would steal all of my money, and now he's got money to get an apartment. Ridiculous. So we get an apartment. He lets me stay in the front room, but he wants me to date him when he wants me to date him. You know, control, right? Very much control. Some other things go on. I knew I wasn't going to stay there long term because I couldn't get full-time work. I couldn't pay his full-time rent. He was about to lose his job. I mean, we'd only been there for a few months and it was going to be over. And during this whole time, I'd only had alternating weekends with my kids for visits during the days. I had custody till I lost my apartment, and then I lost custody, and that's why I was staying with, relationships that were sick, because I became very codependent when I lost my kids. I liked not to date at all while I had custody. That's my preference, basically. But without them, I went crazy and I had to have somebody around, and I settled for anything. It seemed like that's, I guess, what happened. And it happens with a lot of us, so, it's sad. Okay, so at this point, he had pulled a gun on me. I had to call my dad for help, and then my dad was threatening, gave me some like crazy situational stuff too, and things went really bad. Got away from the guy after we got evicted. Okay, had put stuff in storage, got evicted. Actually, no, we lost everything. We had to throw everything away. I lost everything. And I'm walking to my uncle's house. It's the only place that I could think of to stay, and I'm walking there, and this guy, my ex-boyfriend, that, has pulled a gun on me, was following me to my uncle's house every step of the way, and it was miles, you guys. I had to walk like 9 miles, it seemed like. It was probably close to that, to get to his house. I haven't looked it up. It could be even longer. I don't know. But I had to walk all day and into the night. Didn't have money for a cab or a bus. Wasn't running, so I had to walk that on the weekend. And got there, and he's like, oh, I just walked her here. He fought with me the whole way, by the way. I mean, literally fought with me, threatened me, accusations. I'm not leaving, but, we're not. I mean, it was just horrible. And a few days later, my uncle let me stay there, of course. A few days later, and my uncle was not stable at all. He wasn't a stable person. A few days later, the ex-boyfriend comes back and says, I just want to see if she needs some money and see if she needs anything. And, he sweet-talked my uncle every day until he's like, yeah, I'm homeless too. Where I was staying, they kicked me out. My uncle's like, well, you stay with us. I'm like, he did it before he asked me, and I didn't want to tell him this is a domestic violence situation. I didn't tell him, I didn't want to tell him, and now, it only lasted a week anyway. All of this transpired over a week, and then I left. Caught meningitis and left. So, that relationship, I should have been able to get into the domestic violence shelter. I called and called and called, and they never would let me in. Same thing happened. There's no answer, or they're full every single time. I could never get into a domestic violence shelter. I had been previously in some relationships, but not since my marriage. Okay? Now, I go and stay with my dad. I'd had surgery at this point. I'd had gallstone surgery, and I was only a few months in recovery from that, from surgery, and it was time to, see if Dad would help. That's what Mom said, so I went and asked my aunt, his sister. I didn't want to ask him because, I remember him being abusive, so I didn't want to have to ask him. So I asked his sister, and she said yes, and I told her, I said, I don't want to see him. And then only there a couple weeks, and she insisted that I see him. And so I go see him. And for one of my visits with the kids, my ex-husband had been threatening me. So my dad's like, I'll drop the kids off, you stay here. I wished I hadn't done that, because I kind of remember my ex-husband calling saying, where are the kids? I didn't get them. And I don't know what had happened, but there was a lapse in time before my ex-husband got the kids that day, or that visit, when something happened. And of course, after that, my dad became very the abuse cycles started happening with my dad, as far as he lived out in Apache Junction in the middle of nowhere. He would leave me there. I didn't know anybody out there. That's not where I was. Okay, so let me explain. Towns away from where I lived, okay? Towns away. And I didn't know anybody there. And he would leave me there and take off for like, days, a week at a time. I had no money, no food, no water, nothing. And he would just leave me there. No phone, nothing. And so finally he comes back and I'm like, I've got to leave. I've got to go. I got to go do something in town. He's like, okay, I'll take you to Phoenix. But, I mean, at this point, there had been some verbal undertones of threats. It was very scary. My dad does not threaten and not carry through. Out of all the boyfriends that I've had, I always knew that there was this chance of what they threatened being delayed. I always knew I had a somewhat of a safety zone to get away. With my dad, if he's starting to threaten you, you could be a victim real soon. So I had to leave, and I just told him I have to go to town. I got to go see Mom. Drop me off. So he dropped me off. He made me ride in the back of a pickup truck 3 towns away in the summer in Arizona after gallstone surgery, with no camper or anything on it, just straight out in the hot bed of a truck. And drove me all the way. I mean, should have got pulled over and got a ticket, but anyway, he drove me there, and some other threats transpired, some other, verbiage that was undertoned, and some other things had happened as well. So I was afraid for my life, and I knew my dad was going to carry it out. I don't know what he did with the ex, what he did when he dropped the kids off, but he wanted to cover it up. There was a point where he had taken me out into the desert at one point too. There was a gun in the glove box, and he wanted me to open the glove box, and there was some weird conversation, as far, like I said, very undertone. I was getting very scared to death. And I had no place to stay, no place to go, and he had all of my stuff. He goes, well, just leave everything here, and I'll take you to town, because he didn't want to let me go. Okay, he had plans to do something. The trip to the desert didn't ease his mind that he had handled things good enough. He wanted, I felt that there was going to be another trip. So when I got to town, I was like, Mom, I got to get to the domestic violence shelter. And she's like, but you got your ID and your phone and everything with your dad. I'm like, I can't go get it. There's no way. I can't go get anything. That I can't see him again. I have to go. So luckily, I got in to a domestic violence shelter. So I get in there, and I said, I can't tell you guys what's been going on. I'm afraid to make any accusations with who, with what. And they're like, well, you have to tell us. So I had to tell them, and I was frightened to death. The very next day after being at the domestic violence shelter, some volunteers were there. Some volunteers from a church, a local church. One of the volunteers was my ex-husband's new wife and her mom that were volunteering at this domestic violence shelter. And I'm like, went in and saw my case manager. I'm like, that is my ex-husband's wife and his new mother-in-law. I said, they can't, he was very abusive too. I said, I cannot, they can't see me here. They can't see me here. It became a real problem. Now, when you get into a domestic violence shelter, the one that I was in had a 12-month stay. With it being a 12-month stay, you've got time to sign up for housing programs. You've got time to sign up for all your programs, to get your IDs if you haven't had them, start your courts, do what you need to, right? But I wasn't getting the help to help me follow through with anything that I needed done, anything. Getting my ID, a social security card, a birth certificate. I couldn't get help getting any of that. Sure, I got the resource list, and then, I couldn't get an appointment with my case manager for a week. She went on vacation. Crazy things like that happen. I honestly think that there was, they let me in that domestic violence shelter. I was handed, passed around hand to hand at this point. And not only were my abusers maybe working together or something, I don't know. It was just, I wasn't getting the same help that everybody else was getting in the timely fashion that everybody else was getting. And I honestly think that the ex-husband's wife that was volunteering there was causing the problem, even though she supposedly didn't know I was there. You can't volunteer in an office and go, handle paperwork and not see somebody with your same last name and the same name as your new husband's ex-wife and not put two and two together. Especially since he knew I was staying at a domestic violence shelter. My mom told him that for, messages for my kids. Okay, so at this point, I started seeing the counselor, the psychologist, and telling them that I was going through depression, that previously I had been on no psych meds in my lifetime, but I had taken diet pills for 3 years. And I didn't take a lot of, you would get I got a 30-day dose of diet pills, and it would take me like 3 months to finish them. I took them very sparingly. They were amphetamines, but I never misused them. I did find myself needing to take them. I couldn't see myself not having them because there were days I was so depressed that I couldn't do things without a diet pill. But there were many days I never even took them. Like I said, a 30-day supply could last me 3 months. Where most women, 30-day supply could be gone early. But I did need to replenish every 3 months or so a 30-day supply. So, because there were times where the only thing that got me through the day was having a diet pill that made me feel good, made me feel like I accomplished things, and then I could level out, it seemed like, emotionally. So at the psychologist, I told him that, and he's like, so you are depressed? I'm like, well, yeah. I find myself very scared and depressed, and, there are things the double talk that I've experienced, the gaslighting, there you go, the under talk and the gaslighting that I've experienced. I am very confused about how the past couple years have gone. And so he prescribed me, some like psych meds that almost like put you to sleep, and that's not something that I did. I didn't take sleeping pills. I don't, I drink coffee or I took diet pills. That's the kind of thing that I did in life. I was not, I wasn't a pot user. I didn't do downers or anything like pill, nothing. I didn't do that kind of stuff. So, he prescribed me these, and he told me, don't take them unless, don't start taking these until you're ready to dedicate yourself to them. But if you do feel suicidal or something, start taking them. That wasn't written on the bottle. On the bottle it said, take, 3 a day or whatever. the dosage was every day. So we were having a family day, and they wanted, the women that were without their kids, they wanted a chance for the kids to come visit them. So they asked my mom if she could bring them. The ex-husband wouldn't agree to that. So I had to call him and see if he would bring them, because I did want to see them. And he refused. No, he was upset about me letting my dad drop off the kids and what had transpired, which I didn't even know what had transpired. I don't even know. And his wife said, I'll bring them. I'll take them down there. I know where that place is at. So she was going to bring the kids for family day or for visitation day. 30 minutes or so, less than an hour before visitation was going to happen, the nurse decided that I had these medications, and I had never taken any before, and I had received them back on this date, and she had lost the slip from my doctor that was any kind of contrary directions, and I needed to be taking these pills. I hadn't taken any yet today, and I said, I've never taken those. He said that they were really going to put me to sleep. My kids are about ready to show up. At least I hope so. I don't know if they will. And she forced me to take these pills. So by the time my kids got there, I was drooling crazy, barely one eye, half open, one eye conscious. First time on a psych med ever. And on a day that I wasn't depressed, just anxious because my kids were coming. I hadn't been a problem to anybody. This wasn't court-ordered medication. This was backup medication in case. And so my kids saw me and they're like, oh, Mom really is on drugs. And my son goes, no, I believe in her. I believe in her. I believe in you, Mom. Can you hear me? He didn't think I could hear him, but he patted me on the back and said, I believe in you. And he goes, I'll sit with you. And the stepmom goes, no, I can't have you guys around this. We have to leave. We'll have to do something in court about it. And yes, it did come up in court that I was some kind of drug addict, and then I showed up to a visit on, like stoned, and that wasn't the case at all. At all. So that was something. And of course, the judge realized, from that I was at a domestic violence shelter, that it was medication, and I didn't have to go through any drug testing or anything like that. He, was like, oh, well, trying a new psych med, it got taken care of that way. But I still had a battle for the kids after that. So that was something. So it seemed like here I am at this domestic violence shelter, and it's supposed to be helping me, and the game that I've been trying to escape my whole life of domestic violence and people controlling me and people lying about me and people abusers and their support systems screwing with my life and my children's life, was stronger than ever at this point. I didn't know what case manager I could trust. Are you friends with her and her mom, with my ex-husband's wife and her mom, or what? What's the deal? Now, like I said, I was supposed to be able to stay there for 12 months, but they're like, let's just move you on to a new shelter, and they didn't tell me the new, because you're not liking staff here, you won't see us, you don't trust us, you're not happy about your experience, and I should have seen that and said, no, tough luck, I'm here for 12 months, I'm going to stay, but I didn't. I was like, you're right. Let's move me on. Maybe I'll have better luck at another shelter. And they moved me on to a shelter that was only like a 30-day stay. Now, at the end of 30 days at this new shelter, they put me in the homeless shelter. And I had to fight to get a position back at a domestic violence shelter. And I got back into one more domestic violence shelter after that for 30 days. And then I was forced back into the homeless shelter, evicted again and put back in the homeless shelter. So I had to stay 6 months at the homeless shelter before I got any kind of halfway housing. And then I finally got my housing, my apartment for myself. And that was great, but I had to go through, I was, again, just like in college, I was given the shovel around. And, you know, I don't know what to say. I don't know what transpired with that visitation with my dad and my ex-husband. Was it a lie? Was it the truth? Because I remember my ex-husband's dad saying that he was very familiar with my dad's dad, that they had known each other. And I never hung out with my dad or anything else, because the few times that I did as a kid, it was abusive situations. It was, you know, something psychotic would happen, something dangerous would happen. It was not good memories, you know, or he'd leave us with the stepmom who was abusive. There was always something bad. And he was a drug addict. He would do drugs right in front of us. He was a huge alcoholic, always right in front of us. It was never a pleasant experience with my dad. So I never really wanted to get in contact with him again. It was just a desperate situation. And I was vulnerable at the time and thought that he was trying to keep me from having to experience the ex-husband's fight, you know, a fight with the ex-husband, that it would just be an easier exchange if I wasn't there. And that's stupid. It was really stupid. But you get stupid when you've been through a lot of domestic violence and abuse. You do stupid things. You think people are trying to help you that aren't. Okay, so those were some of my personal experiences and how the domestic violence shelters gave me the runaround, and I think it was controlled by my ex-husband's wife and her mom. I think they were so volunteered for so long and knew so many people in the domestic violence shelter system that, you know, they were just one step ahead of digging, you know, a ditch for me to fall into to take away all of my help. And it took a few turns of the wheel, but they almost did it. You know, I ended up having to go to a homeless shelter instead of getting the help, you know, continuing to get the help that I would have needed at the domestic violence shelter, which was not a very big help at all. A homeless shelter is a lot scarier than a domestic violence shelter. You know, it's you know, you've got some people are there straight out of jail. It's horrible, frightening, and dangerous, more dangerous than a domestic violence shelter. Okay, so some other things that I experienced while I was at the domestic violence shelter, other than that personal experience, was the clientele. The clientele at domestic violence shelters nowadays is very mixed, as far as it's not all just domestic violence people. Some of them will also have people that are recovering drug addicts and stuff like that too, because they've gone through domestic violence. So you've got somebody that should, you know, maybe has just been released from a recovery center, and they're struggling to stay clean. And that's the kind of women that you're going to be around and that your kids are going to be around if they're in the shelter with you. It's not fun. And at the time, it was just after 9/11, you know, like a year later. So there was a lot of foreign refugees in the domestic violence shelter doing crazy stuff. You know, like I would say that they were scouts. There were gang members and definite gang members that you know couldn't associate with anybody because they were part of the gang. But they would scout and try to single out somebody that was young and vulnerable and try to take them down their path. And you saw that happening a lot. What can you do, right? What do? Say you're a gang expert, you know what's going on? You know, you try to talk the person into a wiser decision. But that shouldn't be in your domestic violence shelter. Predators, okay, which are gang members, should not have access to women that are not gang members and that are not predators. They shouldn't be there. I don't care if they've been through domestic violence. If they're predators, they shouldn't be there. Unless they've proven themselves that they're not going to be a predator. And that they're free and clear from their gang, and that's what they're there to do, is get clear from all that predator crap. But then there was the mix of the foreigners that were refugees, okay, and they got way more benefits than the women on domestic violence. They got new clothes, they got, I mean, you just paraded right in front of them, and it was wrong. I mean, they should have taken them somewhere and given them their benefits or something. I mean, it was horrible to feel like, I mean, at the time, none of us even understood why they were there, except for the fact that they were getting funding to put them in a domestic violence shelter. They weren't going through domestic violence. They were refugees from another country. So why were they at a domestic violence shelter? That's so specialty, you know what I'm saying? That domestic violence, women and family, or men and family, should not have to share their home or their dorms or their domestic violence center with refugees. They should be a refugee center. So it was very awkward, and they got to eat 3 times a day when domestic violence women didn't. I mean, there were things that because they were there, they were getting funding for them that domestic violence women weren't getting, and they were getting way more funding. So they were treated 100% better, and it just was a slap in the face in a disgusting manner, you know, horrible. And so what are some other experiences that I've had? Women coming right up while you're sleeping and searching in your bra, like literally looking to see if you got any cash or anything. Most of those are the people that are recovering addicts, or actually I wouldn't say most, yeah, I would say most, but it's not limited to. It could have been any of the groups. But most of them were the recovering drug addicts or the gangsters and the refugees. So the domestic violence women did for the most part, have a camaraderie with each other and try to help each other. But, you know, once they saw the unfair treatment that I was getting, nobody wanted to even sit with me at the table. I was like, you know, like those high school shows where the girl goes and sits down at the cafe table and everybody moves because they knew something was going on in the offices. They knew that I was being singled out and that something was going on, and they didn't want it rubbing off on them. Okay, so that's my experience. I'm going to watch this video and see if there's anything I would add differently. I hope you guys liked it. Give me a thumbs up. At least for the bravery of sharing it all, and blessed be.